Good morning. It is Saturday, September 18th, and we are gathered for our morning devotion. And this one is called Wisely Interpreting Bible Stories. As a first step in wisely interpreting Bible stories with science, art, and heart, we need to put each story in its intended historical context and get a sense of the big narrative in which each story is nested. Roughly speaking, we can locate the stories of Abraham and Sarah between 2000 and 1700 BC. We can place the story of Moses and the Exodus around 1400 BC. We can locate the conquest of the Canaanites around 1300 BC. After which the Hebrew tribes formed a loose confederacy under a series of leaders who are somewhat misleading called judges in the Bible. Tribal leaders or even warlords might be a more accurate name. Those were violent times, and some of the stories for those times are bone-chilling, especially regarding the appalling low status of women and the appalling violent behavior of men. For example, the book of Judges ends with the account of a brutal gang rape, murder, and dismemberment of a young woman, followed by horrific aftermath of intertribal relations and kidnapping of innocent young women. Interesting, in the very next story in the Hebrew Bible, the book of Ruth, we find the polar opposite. A poignant story of two kinds of courageous women, Ruth and Naomi. They forge a resilient life of dignity and beauty in the midst of brutality. Where the men failed, the women prevailed. Wisely interpreting biblical stories. I do love the end here. When men failed, women prevailed. Isn't that the way that it usually works in life? But what he's getting at here is, we just can't take these stories as literal. We need to put them in the context of what is going on. And if you look, you can take the entire biblical story from Genesis to Revelation. You can show it down to one word of love. That's what the entire biblical narrative is about. But you have all these broken stories. There's violent stories. There's stories of love. Naomi and Ruth, right immediately after all these violent acts. And then we have the stories of Jesus and talk about God's new kingdom and all these things. See, we got to take the stories as a whole, not just individually one at one. We take them as a group, and we see where God is working in there. So when we wisely interpret, we're using context. We're using the bigger stories, not just the one line or the one paragraph, the bigger story of what is going on here. That's how you get the true meaning of what the Bible is about. Not just a paragraph or a parable, but the big picture stuff. Again, the entire Bible just speaks of love, but what does that love look like from Genesis to Revelation? It looks very different at the beginning as it does towards the end. But it's truly just about love. In the context of God's creative work in the world, love prevails. Plain and simple. We can interpret all we want. We can boil this down. We can break the words down, look at the original Hebrew or Greek. Ultimately, it falls into the category of love. That's the context that we look at a biblical passage. How is God showing love in this passage? How is God interpreting love for his world? Look at the big picture, my friends. When you read a Bible passage, look at it before and after and see what's going on. Look at the big stories to truly find out the meaning of those stories.